All right, let's begin. Welcome, everyone. Today we have Jose dos Santos, a protective security advisor at the Department of Homeland Security, to talk about preparation and prevention of violent acts. Before I have Mr. dos Santos introduce himself further, we'd appreciate it if everyone muted their audio. Looks like everyone's done that.
Jack, you keep going in and out,
Thank
so we're missing
you.
most of what you say.
This will help us archive the presentation for those who couldn't join us. And then lastly, and if Jose doesn't see them, and Jose, if you wouldn't mind introducing.
Great, thank you, Jack. Just to verify, you were breaking up a little on your end. Am I coming through loud and clear?
Yes, you are.
Okay, great, thank you. Thank you very much for the introduction, and I really appreciate it, and thank you for the opportunity to come and speak with everyone. Quick background on myself. I am a protective security advisor for the Cyber and Infrastructure Security Agency under the Department of Homeland Security. Our mission, our goal is to do these types of events. We reach out to the community, really embed ourselves with the community and provide information, training, resources that are available throughout CISA and the Department of Homeland Security, as well as the federal government. So it's really a great opportunity for me, and I really appreciate being able to speak with everyone, and hopefully I can impart a little bit of knowledge, maybe some information, tools, tips on hopefully, that can be used to secure farmers markets and other open air events. The better prepared we are, the more resilient we become, and ultimately the more lives we can help save if we ever have an incident that causes unfortunately negative consequences. So thank you very much for the opportunity. Jack, did you want me to jump right back into the slides, or are there any other comments that you want to make beforehand?
No, take it away.
Okay, great. And just to show everyone that I am not an artificial intelligence program here, I'll turn on my video for a quick second. This is me. I have been having some issues. I was getting some feedback on when Jack was speaking, so I'm going to turn the video off, but just wanted to introduce myself, let everybody see who I am as I go through these slides. And of course, I can throw the video back on when we wrap up and go through questions and answers. Okay, so I am going to share my screen. Sorry, I was trying to print some slides here. Okay, Jack, if you don't mind, Jack, Diane, if you could just verify again that my slides are being displayed. Perfect. Hello, Jack. Okay, great. Okay, so again, we're here today to talk about some security preparedness and some options for consideration on how to put measures in place to protect open air type of events, understanding that some members may also conduct these markets in closed environments, but what we'll talk about will also include those types of environments. So we had originally specifically discussed active shooter type of incidents and events, but as I thought about the information that would I think be most helpful for everyone, I wanted to take a step back and talk about the overall threats that may be presented to the type of events that your members conduct. So I'm going to go through all types of threats, all types of vulnerabilities, and then we'll wrap it up talking specifically about active shooter incidents. Okay. So first, I wanted to talk about some key vulnerabilities that I think are present in the type of events that your membership conducts. thinking about the farmers markets that I have personally visited and attended and been a part of, as well as other mass gathering outdoor events, one of the key vulnerabilities I think we're all concerned about is the level of open access. And we want to bring in as many people as possible to these events. And when we have large congregations of people, it presents a vulnerability. When we think about the bad actors and assailants that are looking to do harm, that's one of the points that they look for. Unfortunately, their goals, their motivation is to have an impact on as many people as possible. So there's a balance that we have to find between providing open access, which is the best situation for these types of events, with securing the event so that we can provide for the safety and security of the individuals that are attending. So it's definitely a balance a fine line that we have to walk. And as we go about planning these events, we really have to consider how we can find that perfect balance, or as perfect as we can get. We all know and understand, nothing's ever perfect, but we want to do our best to provide as much safety and security for the attendees and for the vendors and everyone that's participating in these events, while also providing the open access so that everyone feels welcome and is able to enjoy the market and the event that we're providing. And sometimes these types of events, as vendors come in, they set up their tables, they have tablecloths covering a lot of their products. There are multiple locations that can hide dangerous materials. These bad actors and assailants, they may have something that they've developed and built into a package, into a backpack or something like that. If it's an explosive device or some kind of chemical or biological agent. Yes, both threats that we are concerned about. They can find a multitude of places to hide those types of materials. Often we find these events are operating with a staff of temporary employees and possibly even volunteers. So that will limit our ability to provide a level of training to these individuals or a level of preparedness for these individuals, because they may be there for a single day, or they may only be there for a couple of hours. So we have to take that into consideration as well. When we have these individuals that may only be there for a limited amount of time, how can we impart the knowledge that they need to provide for a safe and secure event? Understanding that they may only be there for a limited amount of time. A lot of these events, and I'm sure everyone knows from the different locations that they've worked in and have been have been involved with, evacuation may be difficult. A lot of times these events are set up in parking lots. Or even in an indoor setting, there may only be a single entrance and a single exit because of the way that has to be set up with everyone, with all the vendors' tables and all the products that are being displayed and sold. So that becomes a difficulty and a vulnerability as well. If something were to happen, how do we get as many people to safety and evacuate from the area as possible? Access to peripheral areas. Again, as I think about the different markets that I've attended and visited, when we set up in a parking lot, there may be multiple access points or multiple ways to get into the area, for a bad actor. Maybe they can sneak in between two vendor tables that a customer may not be able to come through. But if they're trying to access and rush into the event to do their whatever bad thing they have planned, they may have multiple ways to do that. And then finally, potentially limited places to hide. This becomes especially true when we think of an active shooter incident. And we'll go through this at the end. But DHS subscribes to the run, hide, fight methodology of responding to an active shooter. Well, if there are limited options to run and we're looking for places to hide, the open air market environment may not present or provide as many opportunities to find the places to hide, which now limits the options that are available to get away from the active shooter incident. So I wanted to just talk about those key vulnerabilities as I understand them. And then on the right-hand side of the slide, you see these are the percentage of locations that have been uh, attacked by active shooters. So in a study that was conducted by the FBI from 2000 to 2019, they broke down all the incident locations of active shooter events. And they determined that 43% of the active shooter incidents occurred in commercial facilities. Those are your malls, your movie theaters, your supermarkets, things like that. But you can see in green, the open spaces, pretty large percentage, 14%. It's actually the third highest percentage by location of places that were attacked by active shooters, which is a very high vulnerability and a key risk that we have to understand and consider as we prepare for these events. So when we talk about the threats and hazards, I mentioned already, active shooter incidents, but there are also other hazards such as improvised explosive devices. We've seen many attacks that have taken place where bad actors and assailants have used improvised explosive devices. There was an incident in New York City. Thankfully, the device did not work and no one was injured, but an individual built an improvised explosive device into their car, left the car parked in Times Square, and they were intending on exploding their vehicle. Again, thankfully, it was discovered and the device did not explode. Otherwise, a lot of people could have been hurt and possibly killed in that. But it is a real threat and a real hazard that we have to consider and think about as we prepare our safety and security procedures as we conduct events. Vehicle ramming is another threat and hazard that we have to consider. Just, I believe yesterday, there was an incident in New York City. An individual ran a red light and and hit 7 people. That person then continued to drive away, and had 2 other accidents before they were stopped by law enforcement. Now that wasn't we don't think, it's still under investigation, but we don't think it was a malicious attack. It appears that it was an accident, but the individual did the wrong thing by not stopping afterwards. But there have been deliberate vehicle ramming attacks as well. Again, coming back to New York City in October, Halloween of 2018, 2017, I believe, there was an individual that rented a truck and drove down the bike path in Lower Manhattan and injured a bunch of people. Active shooter, arson has been used by individuals as an attack method, purposely setting fire to buildings to hurt people. Then, of course, there's always accidents that we have to consider and think about, and develop plans and procedures to try and limit the number of accidents that may occur. Natural hazards, extreme weather, and then I threw aircraft in there because the use of unmanned aerial systems or drones is becoming very prevalent, and it's something that we have seen overseas where bad actors have used these drone platforms, this technology to perform attacks, but that also can fall under the accident category, where someone may be legitimately flying a drone in an area, maybe for photography or whatever the case is. But it's technology, right? Something can always go wrong with technology. And if that drone were to have an issue and come crashing into an open air market where there's a lot of people, large gathering of people, it could cause significant damage. So another consideration of a potential threat that I think it's important that we think about and consider. So as we think about all these threats and all these possibilities of things that may go wrong and that may have a negative impact and consequence that may hurt or injure people, we want to look at the protective measures that we have available and that we can consider implementing to help us mitigate some of those threats and vulnerabilities, right? Things that we can do to lessen the impact or maybe even prevent any of these negative consequences from occurring. So we have four different ways of doing that. One is to devalue the event, and all that means is to lower the appeal of the facility or the event to those criminal or terrorist actors, and make the facility less interesting as a target. You see a lot of big name corporations, they may open up a brand new headquarters building and not put any signage on that building so that no one knows that they're there. The hope is that if no one knows what's being done in that building or who owns that building, who works in that building, the value of an attack against that particular corporation or organization is lowered. And then we have detect, right? How do we spot the presence of adversaries, criminal actors, and or dangerous materials, and provide responders with information that they may need to mount an effective response, right? So what can we do to identify those threats and those vulnerabilities before something happens, so that either we can address it, or if we observe an individual coming in with a weapon, right, we want to detect that as quickly as possible so that we can respond to it appropriately. But that falls under the detect way of implementing protective measures. And then we have deter. How do we make a facility more difficult to attack successfully, right? What measures can we implement? Hiring security or putting up barricades, things of that nature that will make it more difficult for an individual to conduct an attack, which hopefully will deter them from wanting to conduct the attack at that location. We think when we think about our own home security, right? There's the old, very old adage where you have two houses on the same block, maybe even right next to each other as neighbors. One home has a sign stating that they have an alarm system, and the next door neighbor does not have a sign. A criminal may be more apt to try and break into the home that doesn't have a sign, because they are not being deterred by the fact that there is some method of identifying them and calling attention to what they're trying to do. So that's what we're trying to do under that deter, right? Make it more difficult for someone to conduct an attack, so that hopefully they make that decision that it's not going to be a successful attack, so I'm not even going to try and do anything negative to this event. And then finally, we have the defend. How do we respond to an attack to defeat those actors, those adversaries, those individuals that are trying to cause damage to the event? And how do we protect that event and mitigate any effects of whatever attack that individual may have planned? So in order to, the implementation of those protective measures really is going to involve a commitment of resources. Those resources might be the form of people, equipment, materials, time, and also money, right? As venue owners and operators, there's a need to coordinate and cooperate with local law enforcement, emergency responders, and other organizations at the local and even state or possibly federal level, to discuss what measures can be implemented, maybe discuss the potential threats that are out there. Talking with local law enforcement in an area where a market is going to be held, maybe in that discussion, there could be information that can be shared. If there is an individual that there have been reports about, or maybe they're investigating certain individuals because they've made threats. Well, that's information that would be helpful to a venue operator, right? Because then they can put information out there to their workers to be on the lookout for suspicious activity or suspicious behavior of individuals. So it's really key to have that partnership. And that's really the first step in developing the protective measures that can be implemented to secure these events. From there, we want to look at how do we plan and ultimately prepare for implementing these protective actions, these security measures to provide for the safety and security of the attendees of our event. In order to do that successfully, we have to understand the risk and know what the vulnerabilities are. So when we talk about understanding the risk, having an understanding of what the potential threats are, which could be natural and or man-made, right? Those are things, individuals, entities, or actions that have or can have potential to harm. The vulnerabilities are those physical features or operational attributes that may provide an opportunity for the threat to cause or exploit a particular hazard, right? So a vulnerability, let's say in an office building, your front door is wide open. There's no access control. There are no locks. Anyone can just come in and out. And there's no way to keep the wrong people out, right? Those adversaries, people that are looking to do harm. So not having any kind of access control would allow someone to come in. That is a vulnerability. And then the consequence would be the effect of an event or an incident or an occurrence on the event that's taking place. So when we multiply or add all these together, we come up with the risk. So when we look at the graphic on the right-hand side, and this is a map of an actual farmer's market, actually in my local area, this is their layout. Each one of those red blocks with numbers are particular vendors, and then they had a list of vendors. But if we look at that and we try to determine what are the threats and what are the potential vulnerabilities of this particular setup for this market. So first, what stands out right away is there are vehicles parked right up against those vendor tables, right? So the parking area provides easy access right into the farmer's market. Individual, even if it was not a malicious act, it was a pure accident, right? Someone steps on the gas instead of the brake when they're trying to park their vehicle. Actually, real world example that's happened to me, sitting in traffic and the person behind me, instead of hitting their brake, slams on their gas and runs right into the back end of my car. So it is something that can happen and has happened and will probably happen again in the future. But when we look at the setup, right, the vulnerability obviously is pretty apparent that having vehicles park so close to the market provides a vulnerability. And it would be on the we have to emphasize how do we protect ourselves from that? How do we stop that from happening? Maybe we can have the vendors park their vehicles in that area instead of letting customers or attendees park in that area, to at least provide some kind of barrier or protection from where the attendees would be parking and the market itself. That's one way of, calculating the risk of something occurring and looking at mitigating efforts to protect against that. So we have several steps that we can take in trying to plan for and identifying the protective measures that we can put in place as we conduct our events. First, as I mentioned, connection, right? Develop relationships with the local law enforcement, local first responders in the area where these markets are taking place, because there's a lot of information that's available, and having that partnership will foster a relationship that will be ultimately beneficial to assisting the marketplace, providing for the resources and efforts to protect against harm to the market and the customers and attendees, right? Clarifying emergency response responsibilities related to venue security. Some locations will provide police resources, law enforcement resources. Others may not. So then that brings us to the conversation of, if we can't have local law enforcement provide that level of security, do we have to go with private security or maybe even volunteers to serve as security? Next is developing the plan. And when we talk about planning, plans are not something that have to take months and months to put together. It could be a simple meeting of maybe some key vendors or the event organizers and those local responders to talk about the area or the event space and talk about what what potential threats exist for that area, what the vulnerabilities might be in the design of how everything is set up, how the tables are organized, and then coming up with those mitigation efforts. Part of that process, though, should also include responding to the event itself, right? What are the procedures going to be for evacuating the venue in the event that a threat it is either too serious or a threat comes to realization, someone does attack the event, right? How are we going to evacuate everyone and get them to safety? And then probably most importantly here in the planning effort is having that communication process, right? How will the event organizers communicate with law enforcement if something were to occur? How are they going to communicate with the vendors? Is there a way of having mass notification, either speakers or a PA system if the event space is so large? You want to, have communications to the entire event space so that you can let everyone know what is going on. If law enforcement is responding, you want to broadcast that message that maybe there's a safety incident, everyone needs to evacuate or maybe stay away from a particular area, but it's important to have a communications ability so that the proper information can be communicated. Next would be training, and again, when we talk about training, oftentimes we think about very expensive, very time-consuming things. Weeks of preparation and hours conducting training. But training can be just a simple, maybe asking vendors to arrive an hour earlier than what would they would typically arrive to set up, so that you can go over the plan for the event, right? Go over the evacuation process, maybe even the evacuation routes. So that they know where they should be going and maybe assist in telling their customers or anyone that's in their area where the most appropriate evacuation route is. Having those volunteers or those staff members coming in and explain to them what their responsibilities would be if there were to be an incident. Going over the run, hide, fight for a specific active shooter incident. And then if there's any specialized training that would need to take place, if the event requires medical personnel to be on staff, or if you have volunteer security or even paid security, establishing what their role and what their responsibilities are is extremely important so that they know how they are going to respond should an incident occur. And again, training can sometimes be looked at as very difficult and very complex, but it could be something as simple as just a short meeting before the event happens and takes place. If there's an opportunity to conduct an exercise, just to conduct a drill, walk through the evacuation route, that would serve to emphasize the plan that's in place. So now not only has everyone been told what the evacuation route is, but they've walked that evacuation route, so they're familiar with what it looks like, and maybe there are unique features of that evacuation route that you would only know about if you actually walked and conduct that drill. So if it's an opportunity to further enhance what the training is providing and what the plan has been developed to institute, and it just provides that emphasis that I'm familiar with this route, I've seen it, I know it, I can better explain it and use it if we do have to evacuate. And it does not have to be weeks and significant amounts of time. It could be a discussion, it could be a quick walkthrough, just a couple of hours before the event takes place. And then finally, reporting, providing that information to law enforcement if there is suspicious activity, if an individual is acting suspiciously, and we'll go through some behaviors to look out for and to be situationally aware of, to identify that an individual that may be planning or thinking of conducting something, some event. But being able to report that information to law enforcement so that they can take the appropriate measures Or even, again, if we have private security or volunteers, as I mentioned earlier, through those initial conversations with the local law enforcement, if they do have or are aware of potential threats and have descriptions of individuals that they want everyone to be aware of, getting that information and reporting that information to everyone so that they have it available and can act on it if they do see those things is extremely important. Some things to consider in the reporting phase of the plan. Looking out for someone that's conducting surveillance. Someone doing laps around the perimeter of the event. Maybe taking pictures of the event. Now every event is different, every area is different. It may be perfectly normal and appropriate for a lot of pictures to be taken, but some areas it may be abnormal. So also understanding the location that you're in is very important, so that you can identify what is out of place in order to make the appropriate notifications and reports. Other things to look out for. Repeat visitors or outsiders who have no apparent business in the area. You see the same person coming through every hour, or maybe loitering outside and never actually purchasing anything. Might be something that's considered suspicious. Maybe they're trying to identify when the time of day is where the most visitors may be attending. Erratic vehicle operation, right? Same thing as with individuals. The same vehicle that continues to drive around the event. Abandoned parcels or backpacks, right? Backpack just sitting in the middle of the venue with no one apparently taking ownership of it. Bulky or unseasonable clothing is another behavior or identifying feature that maybe we want to consider being aware of to make reports. It's the middle of the summer, yet somebody is walking with a long overcoat. Is it someone that's just always very cold, or are they potentially hiding something under that bulky clothing? And all these bullet points are things that we can consider as being suspicious or abnormal, that we want to think about beforehand, or at least be aware of beforehand, so that we can make that determination whether it is something that we should be reporting to local law enforcement or the security force, so that they can do the proper investigation to determine whether or not it's a threat. Now, talking about all this reporting and all these things to be observant to, of course, you need to have that system for reporting those concerns, right? Whether it's a text-based system, or maybe you have an incident report that you can hand out to everyone, where they could just jot down their notes and provide it to someone. But having that method for how incidents are reported is important to cover and have as a consideration of the plan. So some cost-effective mitigation methods that we can look at and consider. Evaluating vehicle traffic patterns near the venue so that we can implement strategies to reduce vehicle speeds and improve pedestrian safety is one thing that we can look at that's pretty cost-effective. In the image that I showed before, wouldn't cost anything at all to have the customer parking area located away from the event area, or at least provide a barrier in between customer parking and the event area, so that we can reduce the likelihood of an accident occurring where a vehicle is driving into the event area, right? Conducting a site assessment prior to holding the event. Again, this is something that can be considered and discussed with local law enforcement. Do they have the resources to provide a security assessment? Protective security advisors may be available, so it's a discussion that can be had with CISA and DHS. Monitoring vehicles that are approaching or coming in. Again, that's something that may be resource intensive. You would have to have an individual dedicated to providing that service, but it's a consideration that can be made. And if the event is not the owners, operators of the event are not able to have a dedicated resource, maybe that's something that can be included in the training portion or the planning portion for the event of letting everyone know that they should be looking out for these suspicious vehicles, suspicious behaviors, right? So it almost becomes a force multiplier where if the resource is not available to have a dedicated security force, we can have those force multipliers by providing the training and awareness to all the workers that are there, and even the vendors, right? The vendors can be included in this in this planning effort as well. But now that's all of those people are now making those observations and looking for potential behaviors or actions that may indicate, something negative. So talking a little bit more about those suspicious behavior indicators, mentioned a lot of these already, individuals loitering in those unauthorized areas, individuals attempting to gain information about the operations and security of the venue. Someone that walks up, wants to know very specific information that a typical customer wouldn't be interested in. Okay, so now we're going to shift a little bit. Now we've talked about the overall threats that exist for these types of events. I'm going to focus the next few minutes on talking specifically about active shooter, and then we'll open up. We'll close out with the video and open up to questions. But a key thing that I want to start off with when we talk about active shooters is understanding characteristics of an active shooter. There's a very important distinction between active shooters and let's say criminal activity, right? Criminals have a goal in mind, but once they achieve that goal, they typically leave, and stop their activity because they have obtained what they wanted to obtain. If they're robbing a convenience store, for example, they get the money out of the cash register, they turn and leave the convenience store, and no one gets hurt. Whereas an active shooter is an individual that is actively engaged in killing or attempting to kill people in a confined populated area, right? Their goal is to hurt people. So there's probably nothing that's going to be said or nothing that can be given to an active shooter that is going to take them away from their goal. Their motivation is to hurt people. And it's important to understand that, because that puts us in the mindset or a different mindset of how we can prepare ourselves and protect ourselves against an active shooter. If we know that their goal is to come and hurt me or possibly kill me, my mindset is going to cause me to react in a different way than if I were in another type of event. Most cases, there's no pattern or method to the selection of victims. It could be a known individual, maybe a former student, former customer, but it also might be a totally unknown individual. An individual chooses a location that's several hundred miles away from where they live, right? They have no other connection to that facility or to that space. They've just decided that that's where they're going to conduct their active shooter event. Most active shooter situations are unpredictable and evolve quickly. And because of that, it's important to be prepared and to have awareness, because those are the keys to helping protect our employees, our customers, and ourselves. With some statistics that have been taken from the FBI analysis of active shooter events, you can see on the right-hand side for 2022, those are the months where the most active shooter incidents have taken place. You can see May is a very active month for active shooters. Some of the reasons behind that, or some of the discussions for why that is because timing of school, school breaks and school vacations. Below that are days of the week where the most incidents have occurred, and then times of day. So as we think about when we have or hold farmers markets, right, it's usually on the weekend, Saturday and Sunday. So definitely a concern that we want to be aware of and think about as we plan for the next event. Based on the analysis of past active shooter incidents, there's we call this the pathway to violence. At the end of the day, an active shooter, an individual that becomes an active shooter, is likely not making that decision, that day. Okay, waking up in the morning, I'm going to be an active shooter today, and then going and conducting their attack. Something has most likely happened in their life. They've developed some kind of grievance that has convinced them that they need to become an active shooter. And these are some of the stressors that have come up in the study of active shooters. They may have mental health issues. They may have financial strains. There might be job-related stressors. Maybe they were fired. They're having conflict with parents. Maybe they were bullied as a student at a particular school. But what's important is that they've developed this grievance, and unfortunately, because they haven't been able to overcome that grievance or get the help that they may need to deal with that grievance, they start to ruminate on that grievance, and they develop that violent ideation where they make a decision that they are going to become an active shooter because that is the only way that they feel they can resolve the grievance that they have. Once they've made that decision, they then spend some time researching and planning the event, right? The active shooter event that they want to conduct. And you can see on the right-hand side, based on the study that has been conducted on these events going back to 2000, that is the amount of time that active shooters have spent researching and planning for their incident. And you can see the most amount of time is 1 to 2 months. Why this is important is because in that 1 to 2 month period, we have to ask ourselves, has there been an opportunity in that time to observe behaviors of this individual and identify, behaviors that may have been concerning enough to make a report so that it could be investigated and potentially stop this individual before they become an active shooter and before they conduct their act, right? When we look at the pre-attack preparation, time spent that these individuals, the time that these individuals have spent preparing for an incident has gone anywhere from less than 24 hours all the way up to 12 months. And again, in the ways that they would be preparing for the attack, that might be collecting the materials that they need to conduct the attack, right? It might be telling other people, maybe under the veil of it being a joke, but they tell someone, I'm going to conduct this attack, right? So all that is included in that time period. And again, it puts us in a position of asking ourselves, was there something, or is there something, am I observing something that would cause me concern to make a report that this individual may be planning or preparing for an attack. And then finally, the probing and breaching. This goes back to what I was talking about earlier, that suspicious behavior, individuals, that are trying to get into an area that they shouldn't be in to test that security, to see how far they can actually get. If they need to get into a restricted area, because that's where they've determined the most people are that they can affect, they're going to test that and try and identify ways that they can get into the areas and identify methods that they can use to conduct their attack. And again, with that, there are observations that potentially could be made where we can report and notify the right authorities to be able to address that, or at least investigate that and determine whether it is a potential risk. So this last slide here is a video. Unfortunately, we do not have a video of open air markets, but I understand some markets are also conducted indoors. So I wanted to present this video. It covers the run, hide, fight, and the methodology and things that we can do to prepare for and respond to active shooter incidents if we find ourselves in that type of incident. But it's a great summary of everything we've been talking about today. So I'm going to play this video, and Jeff Van, if you could just let me know if the sound is not coming through, and I will try and restart it. Otherwise, I'll assume that everything is working properly.
So I'd gotten a robocall
It's working.
from Gabby Gifford saying she was going to have a Congress on Your Corner in my neighborhood. And I decided I was going to go. I got there early, which is not my MO, and I signed in and with Daniel Hernandez and asked him if he was going to take people in order. I think I was the third one on the list, and he said yes. So I went into the grocery store. It was right after Christmas. I was going to see what things were on the sale racks.
My daughter Emma was a senior in high school. She had spent the entire summer being Gabrielle Gifford's page, but she had never taken the time to get a picture with Gabrielle Giffords. We saw that Gabrielle Giffords would be at Congress on Your Corner, and it is literally on the way.
We went there, got there early, and then we went over and signed up on the list to talk with her. There's one person already in line, so Doris was number 2 on the list, and I was number 3.
Now there's 20 people there, and I asked Daniel, are you going to still take people in order? And he hesitated and said, I'll try. And I said, not necessary. I'm just going to go to the end of the line, which in this case I think may have saved me from being injured or killed.
I started talking to her. We finished with that, then we were talking about some other issues.
All of a sudden I heard a bang.
Shot Giffords, then shot me, and then he turned and shot them. So there's about like a little over 4 seconds. There were 12 shots, total of 33 shots in about 17 seconds.
My husband and son were able to run, and my daughter and I were unable to run. There was no thought attached to it. I had picked up my daughter, who is a small teenager, and I had thrown her against the wall, and I had covered her.
If I run to the west or the north, I am liable to make myself a target. So I decided my best chance for survival was to lay down on the ground and hope that the shooter missed me, didn't see me.
I was instantly down. I really was kind of temporarily paralyzed when I hit the concrete. Thankfully, Doris was not shot.
At that point, he ran out of ammunition. He reloaded, and Roger Salzgeber and Bill Badger got up from the shock of the shooting and chased after him and knocked him down at that point, and the magazine fell to the ground.
And so then I looked over, and the woman standing behind me in line, which I now know is Pat Maish, had looked at this young man and grabbed the magazine out of his hands.
His gun was in his right hand. It was outstretched. They were shouting, "Get the gun, get the magazine." I immediately knelt up, and at that time I was at the small of his back, and they had him pinned on the right side. But I noticed that with his left hand he was taking another magazine out of his pocket, and I was able to take that away from him.
At that moment, I reached for my cell phone to call 911, and so I was amazed that in this trauma situation that I had the presence of mind to think about calling 911.
What was the most amazing thing about that day? And I believe it was my mind, that my mind could process a number of things at the same time. And I guess I would tell people in this day and age, you'd hate to have your adrenaline on high all the time, but to just try to become more observant, more aware of your surroundings. I don't know that I would say be on alert all the time, because I think that's a very difficult thing to do.
So my apologies, I got ahead of myself in the presentation here. Should have introduced this video as the experiences of a group of folks that were in an active shooter incident, and they were actually in an open air outdoor event. And you can hear Pat Maish as she describes her experience. Right, it was an open air event, she had decided that she had no place to run because the shooter might possibly see her and attack her. So she decided that her best option was to hide. And again, in open air market, there was no place to hide. So her decision on how to hide was to lay down on the ground. But then she talks about the action that she took, which really, it amazes me that she was able to do this. She decided that she had an opportunity to fight back, and her way of fighting back was to grab the magazine out of the attacker's hands, preventing him from reloading his weapon and possibly killing and harming other people. So I think she really did a really great job of describing her thought process and what she went through and how it relates to what we can all think about, all the options that we have available, right? We always have to consider our options to run and to hide and to ultimately fight if we have to, if that is the only available option that we have to us. And that brings us to the next slide where, again, as we think about how to respond to an active shooter, if there's an accessible escape path, we want to try and take that path, try and get as far away from the threat as we possibly can to put ourselves in a safe position, safe place, right? Trying to evacuate. And that's why I come back to the point we made earlier of thinking about those evacuation routes and having those options or planning for those options beforehand so that you know where to go if you have to escape or evacuate from an area. And if that's not an available option, having a idea in mind of where we can hide. And again, I understand it's difficult in an open air market and environment, but can we look at the vendor tables, hiding under a table or hiding behind vehicles? If the vendors have their cargo trucks, can we hide behind one of the vehicles? If that's an available option. And then finally, as that last resort, if running or hiding are not available options, because those would put us in harm's way, fighting back, right? When our life is in imminent danger, trying to disrupt or incapacitate the active shooter is an option that is available. And this is the video that I described earlier. Again, apologies for jumping ahead, but this video summarizes the run, hide, fight and takes us through the response to an active shooter in a indoor social environment.
Hi, can I get you started with drinks?
Oh, sorry, I gotta take this.
We'll need a minute.
Seriously, no, I'm here. Stop.
Hey, you need to back up. You can't be here anymore. Get out of my face, what, man. You think I'm afraid of you? Get off, man. 911, there's a clip.
Chances of survival. Don't go up here.
Police, where is he?
By the bar, blue jeans, black shirt. Empty hands up, follow their instructions.
I'm in the direct line of fire if I head for either exit, but I have other options to help me survive. Guys, come on, in here. Come on. Go, go, go. Lock and barricade the door.
Both my exits are blocked by the shooter. I gotta stay hidden. I'm no victim. I'm ready for this.
He's applying direct pressure to the wound to stop the bleeding until we can find a tourniquet. In the meantime, turn off your phones and make a plan to defend yourself.
We have to fight to survive. If you control the weapon, you control the shooter. I'll go for the gun. He'll go for his arms. The bartender will go for the head.
Where is he?
We got him right here. Stay down.
Please, show me your hands.
Over here.
You can survive a mass shooting if you're prepared. Remember, run, hide, or fight. Run. Wherever you go, be aware of alternate exits. Quickly and cautiously evacuate in a direction away from the attacker. Don't hesitate. Seconds matter. Remember windows and emergency exits. Leave belongings behind. Keep your empty hands raised and clearly visible when exiting a building. Follow all instructions from the police. Don't stop until you're sure you've reached a safe location. Hide. If there is no safe escape route, find a good hiding place. Lock and barricade the door. Silence cell phones. Prepare a defense plan. Fight. Fight only as a last resort. Use available objects as improvised weapons. Use teamwork and surprise. A coordinated ambush can incapacitate an attacker. You're fighting for your life. Don't fight fair. Stop the bleed. A victim can die of uncontrolled blood loss in 5 minutes or less. Apply pressure or a tourniquet to control severe bleeding. Go to fbi.gov/survive to learn more.
So in summary of the last hour that we've been going through, the threats, vulnerabilities, and how to respond and prepare for an active shooter. Right, wanted to boil it down to a few key items. Planning ahead, right? Develop that emergency action plan, especially if you're planning for an event where multiple customers, visitors, vendors are going to be attending. Right, develop that plan. Engage as many people as you can, the local first responders, the vendors, if possible. Have that exit plan. Have those evacuation routes beforehand. Train individuals as appropriate and as able to, so that they understand what the plan is and where the evacuation route, so that they can not only evacuate themselves but also help others to evacuate the area. If possible, learn life-saving skills. This is very important for all of us as individuals. We can't have enough skills for ourselves, right? So having knowledge of basic first aid, the Stop the Bleed is a great program that's offered by FEMA. Red Cross also provides training on that. And then finally, staying alert, being observant of our surroundings, so that we can have the opportunity to observe those suspicious behaviors, suspicious things going on around us, so that we can make the proper notifications to the tribe, whether it's a threat, and ultimately may possibly lead to the prevention of an incident. And putting that all together, if we have the ability, if we have the time and resources, practice. As I've mentioned earlier, bringing folks into the event area earlier than the start time, just to have a quick discussion, a quick planning session, if possible, the drill of walking through those evacuation routes, so everyone is familiar with it and understands what the plan is if something were to happen. And that brings me to the end of my presentation. The QR code here will take you to the CISA Preparing and Securing Mass Gatherings website, where you can find additional resources for active shooter and other events, other threats that we've talked about. There are resources that can be downloaded. We have templates that can help in the development of emergency action plans, and there's just a ton of resources and information that's available on our website. So I encourage everyone, if able, take a few minutes, go to our website, CISA.gov. You can do a search in the search bar for specific threats, vulnerabilities, or you can just spend a few minutes exploring the website and downloading and reviewing those resources. And then I have my contact information. So a little bit about the PSA program. I'm located here in the New York City area, but we have PSAs throughout the country. There's at least one PSA in every single state. Some states, some cities have multiple PSAs. So we are a resource that's available to come out and speak with you and help you or guide you through development of emergency action plans. We can even conduct site assessments of locations where you're conducting your farmers market. So if you're looking to get in touch with your local PSA, again, you can go to the website and look up the contact information, or I am more than happy to link you up with the local PSA if you'd like to reach out to me directly.
Jose, thank you so much.
Absolutely. My pleasure.
Do you have time for a couple questions?
Absolutely.
So there's one question that came up in the chat, which was the data that you gave in the beginning when you were referencing the locations. Is that the number of incidents by location or the number of injuries or deaths by location?
Is that the very first one under the
yes, the circle graph?
Yes, so that is the percentage of incidents at those locations. So try and simplify it. Let's say we're talking about 100 active shooter incidents. That percentage would be, based on 143 incidents occurred in commercial facilities. 14 incidents occurred at open spaces. So it's the number of incidents that have occurred in those locations, or percentage of incidents that have occurred.
Does anyone in the audience have a question?
Is it okay to come off mute?
Yes.
Hi, thanks for this presentation. One thing that really stood out to me, because I've been looking into this somewhat, but the new thing that you mentioned was sort of evaluating, if you see something, say something, what is appropriate to get law enforcement involved. I'm signing in from New York City. So when we're in public spaces, you see all kinds of characters. We don't tend to get law enforcement involved until there's a threat, or there's like a physical action that could result in injury. So if you could talk a little bit about evaluating these threats.
Yeah, that's a tough question. You mentioned you're in the New York City area, and I'm here as well, and I can tell you see a lot of things in New York City. Especially, as you're taking mass transit, subway, trains, there's certainly a lot of things that happen that just, I think a lot of us even will say, well, that's New York for you, right? Only in New York do these things happen. It's a hard question to answer because it really all depends. What might be normal in New York City might be completely out of place when we go up north, right? Maybe the more rural counties, even in New York. So it really comes down to understanding or having knowledge of the area that you're in and what might be considered normal and typical for where you are, or normal behavior of individuals. We can apply that same methodology to interacting with our coworkers or with individuals, even in our family, right? Behaviors might change. Someone that's typically very friendly and outgoing, all of a sudden they're becoming very quiet and standoffish, or they're quick to anger, where normally they would just brush things off. that might be an indicator that there is something that is not normal or that's abnormal, that maybe we want to notify someone. And notifying someone could be, just going to the person directly, say, and start a conversation. Hey, I noticed you're a little off lately. Is there something going on? Maybe I can help you. Or are you dealing with something, with a difficulty in your life? Maybe I can offer advice or point you in the direction of getting help. To help you overcome whatever's causing that change. So I can't really give a step-by-step answer on how to evaluate a situation. It really is going to come down to your reaction and what you feel is abnormal and reaches the level of this is just not just not a situation or not behavior that should go unreported, right? And as far as over reporting, personally, I don't think we can ever over report something. Our law enforcement partners, our first responders, they're there to evaluate these threats, right? So if we're reporting information, the risk benefit, right, of over reporting something or reporting something that turns out to be absolutely nothing unusual or nothing wrong, the benefit of having report that, I think, far outweighs the risk of not reporting it and it turning out to be something that can turn into a very negative consequence. Again, that's why we have our first responders, to step in and investigate those types of reports that are being made, so they can determine whether or not it's a threat.
Any other questions? Jose, I have one actually. I was wondering if there's a balance to be found with the use of barriers and keeping threats out, but also keeping limiting the ability for people to run from a violent act or something like that.
Another great question. There's absolutely a balance that has to be made or determined on that. In that picture that I had on the slide of a farmer's market, they had one entrance, one exit. Now I couldn't tell from the photo, and unfortunately I did not attend that event when the photo was taken. So I can't tell you whether they had barriers in between the vendor tables that actually confined everybody in, almost like a corral. But absolutely, that's something that should be looked at and considered before barriers are set up. You definitely don't want to limit people's ability to evacuate, but you do want to deter or prevent anyone from coming in. So maybe you could set up the barriers where there's still spaces in between the barriers where individuals can evacuate through. Maybe you can put up caution tape that can be easily ripped down, so that gives the signal that, hey, I can't enter through here, but in an emergency, if you need to evacuate, you can easily rip down that caution tape, and provide that area to exit from. Again, it comes down to doing the assessment of the area that you're going to set up in, and planning for having as many evacuation routes as possible, but also meeting that balance of deterring or preventing those individuals or vehicles that you don't want to come in from coming in. Again, there's no right answer because it's going to depend very much on the specific location that you're in, but it is something that should be considered and something that should be planned for in the design of the location. But again, there are ways to come up with workarounds. You know, the caution tape is just one example that I can think of.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Well, thank you so much, Jose. And for the audience, just to let you know, each month the Federation does host our monthly member and friends meetup. And so, you know, if this is your first one, don't worry about it. We archive them on our website, and they take place the fourth Tuesday of every month from 1 to 2. And next month, we're excited to have the Office of Cannabis Management, who will be speaking on the roles of farmers markets and the roles that they can play in regards to cannabis and the roles they cannot play at farmers markets. So Jose, thank you so much. And everyone have a wonderful day.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.